before the courts in the last year some of the most harrowing and traumatic cases. There was outrage at the beginning of the year when Nottingham killer Valdo Calocane avoided being jailed for murder. A court accepted his guilty pleas to manslaughter due to diminished responsibility after he stabbed to death students Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Coomer, as well as school caretaker Ian Coates.
I am satisfied that you are suffering from a mental disorder, namely paranoid schizophrenia. This disorder is of a nature which makes it appropriate for you to be detained in a hospital for medical treatment.
The killer, originally from Guinea-Bissau in West Africa, had first stalked and then stabbed to death the two young students as they were walking home from a night out, before targeting Ian Coates nearby, stealing his van and leaving him dying in the street.
Oh no.
It's emergency. What's the emergency?
Yes, there's been a stabbing on Christian Road. There's somebody lying in the street. I think they're dead. Oh, that was awful.
Calocane used the stolen van to run down and injure a group of pedestrians before he was eventually stopped and arrested.
We were horrified. At no point during the previous 5.5 months were we given any indication that this could conclude in anything other than murder. We trusted in our system, foolishly as it turns out.
In June, a truly horrific case as two boys became the youngest murderers convicted since the killing of toddler James Bulger in Liverpool 3 decades earlier. Jack Carson reported on the most brutal of crimes that saw 19-year-old Shawn Seesahai hacked to death with a machete by two 12-year-olds in Wolverhampton.
It's the 13th of November last year, and the 19-year-old boards a tram with his friends from Handsworth to a stop in Wolverhampton. An hour after leaving his home, he's seen here in a petrol station shop before making his way with one of his friends to the Stow Lawn playing fields. This CCTV is blurry, but police believe this footage at 8:14 p.m. is the moment Shawn was attacked by two 12-year-old boys.
Because of their young age, the two killers were not named. They were both sentenced to a minimum of 8.5 years each in a young offenders institution. More than a year after fleeing to Pakistan, the father, stepmother and uncle of a young girl from Surrey finally faced justice for her murder.
Now, in some breaking news, 3 family members have been found guilty of the murder of 10-year-old Sara Sharif.
Charlie Peters reported on a vulnerable young girl who it seemed was failed by multiple agencies.
An innocent 10-year-old girl, her life stolen by those who should have protected her. Sara Sharif was a bubbly girl. Teachers in Woking said she was confident and full of ideas. But her smile was extinguished. Her body was found with dozens of injuries at her family home in August last year. Jurors at the Old Bailey trial heard about the campaign of abuse inflicted on her. They learned that Sara had been hooded, burned, bitten and beaten during more than 2 years of violence. Sara started wearing a hijab. She was the only member of her family to wear a head covering. The hijab hid the injuries to her face.
There was huge relief across armed policing in October when firearms officer Martin Blake was found not guilty of murdering London man Chris Kaba. After the Old Bailey trial, the court released details of Kaba's history of prolific and violent offending. He'd been a key member of a notorious London gang and was a prime suspect in the shooting of another man in a nightclub just days before he was shot by Sergeant Blake as officers tried to stop his vehicle. The jury reached a quick verdict, clearing the officer and accepting his assertion that he feared for his life and the lives of colleagues as Chris Kaba tried to smash his way out of a police roadblock.
Doors!
In the days after the not guilty verdict, the police watchdog was criticised for bringing the case in the first place. And the Met Commissioner said armed officers felt particularly vulnerable in circumstances where they might be forced to open fire.
No police officer is above the law. But we've been clear that the system holding police to account is broken. I worry about the lack of support officers face for doing their best. But most of all, I worry for the public. The more that we crush the spirit of good officers, the less that they can fight crime.
Former soldier Daniel Khalife was found guilty in November of spying for Iran. The case hit the headlines when he mounted an audacious escape from Wandsworth prison while awaiting his trial. Khalife was arrested 3 days later on a canal towpath in northwest London. At his trial, he claimed he only made contact with Iran in an attempt to become a double agent for British intelligence.
Daniel Khalife has quite a confused character, trying to understand his motivations for providing highly sensitive information to Iran has been an important part of our investigation. But I think you've seen during his own evidence that he has multiple motivations for doing this. I think some of it is that he had created a persona for himself as an intelligence officer, and he was trying to live up to that persona in some way.
More prisoners left Wandsworth early in the past year, part of a controversial release programme here and at jails across the country, as the government desperately tried to ease the prison's overcrowding crisis. But the sight of freed convicts, some responsible for violent crimes, celebrating and giving thumbs up to the Prime Minister played very badly with the public. The early release programme came in for further criticism after news that a number of those freed had quickly gone on to commit further crimes in the community. Overseas, a series of disasters caused widespread destruction and significant loss of life. In October, Spain faced one of its deadliest natural disasters in living memory, when a year's worth of rain fell in the east of the country in just a few days, causing massive flash floods. More than 230 lives were lost, many thousands were left homeless.
Absolute devastation across Valencia today. We're here in this small town of Picaña, where only one of all the bridges here are left still standing. All the others taken down by the flash flooding over the past few days.
It was freak weather again, this time in Italy, which led to the sinking of a luxury yacht off Sicily in August. The Bayesian had been anchored in a bay near the village of Porticello when it was struck by a sudden violent squall, capsizing the yacht, which then sank to the seabed 100 feet below. The well-known British tech tycoon Mike Lynch died alongside his daughter Hannah and 4 others. Their bodies recovered by divers in the days that followed. In June, the nation came together to remember those that fought and died for freedom on the 6th of June 1944, D-Day. Now very few in number, those who took part in the Allied invasion were determined to attend the commemorations, both in the UK and in France, to remember those who didn't come home.
It's just such an honour to be here, incredibly special to speak to these men and hear their stories, and it's just as special to see the graves of those who fell, and like you say, just the sheer volume of them, it's really quite upsetting.
With most veterans now close to or even over 100 years old, D-Day 80 was the last major anniversary they were expected to attend. I was privileged to meet this group of D-Day veterans near Portsmouth in June. 99-year-old George Chandler left an indelible impression. He died 4 months after we met. The young lives he saw lost on those beaches 80 years earlier stayed with him every day.
I was 19 at the time. These kids were younger than me, I know they were. Every time I talk to somebody about D-Day, I'm there.
Across 2024, we lost well-known faces from the world of entertainment and from politics. People who touched so many lives and are sadly missed.
I am a teacher. I am a teacher first, last, always.
I know you guys can see what I'm looking at, and it looks a little bit like Castaway at this point.
Who better to meet these challenges for this nation than the people who live and work in this nation?
I trust this woman. She does U-turns on immigration. She does U-turn on Parliament won't be meeting, having an election till 2020. You can't trust her. Right.
To make